Chris is not here today. He's doing a presentation, so thanks for coming out. We have Rob Morris here today to do our presentation. We're just doing a thank you to our sponsors, and we're going to turn it over to Ben for upcoming events. Our sponsors, we have Fox Rothschild in the house. We've got Terry back there. Thanks for coming out, Terry. I2N, Goshen Group, Hankin Group, Innovation Center, Igniter TV is Sean Dominski here on the live stream. We live stream every event. I think we're into our 80s or so consecutive events, so I'm really proud of that. And Brennan's Furniture helps us out with some of our stuff in here. We also have Mike Luttermoser on the video, and Jared Flanagan, who will be seeing for 23 North, doing photography. She is in the back. Ben, we have some upcoming events.
Yeah, this Wednesday, meaning tomorrow, is our Meteor Meetup, Meteor.js. We're kind of shifting away from demoing products and into education for coding and for hardware as well. So our Meteor Meetup is tomorrow, and that's going to be reconceptualized in future iterations as boot camps, so they're educational opportunities to learn about coding. We also have Joe Purifica, thank you. I work out with him, I should totally know how to pronounce his last name. He founded Entrepreneurial Advisors, and he also helped Halloween Adventures maintain the model that they have, which is a seasonal model for which they will rent or lease space seasonally and then kind of go ghost for the rest of the season. He came up with that concept. So he's a pretty cool guy and has a lot of really interesting stories as well. So yeah, we're ready to roll with Rob.
All right.
Cool.
Without further ado,
Yeah.
Rob.
Welcome.
Take the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Walnut Street Labs, and all the people in the audience, all the people on the internet, around the world, and all the ships at sea. The reason I have this up here is because today is Bastille Day. And so, a day of revolutionary thought. This is my little chat about adventures in commerce, or how I changed the world and kept my privacy. I am Rob Morris, and I have made products that have touched everybody's lives, but nobody knows who I am. I am one of these people who is a rare bird, as in I'm an independent inventor. I don't work in a skunk works or a lab under government contracts. I don't have big funding agencies telling me what to do or leading me down the street. I just try to figure out what people want and how to improve their lives. One of the first things you have to do is you have to think differently than most people. It sounds strange, but it's an uncomfortable way to be. Also, you have to be able to think about what people want. Think about how they live their lives and what you can pick up around the world to improve that. Now, you have to consider that this is a little different than the way your average billionaire thinks. Your average billionaire thinks, how can I take advantage of every situation and squeeze every dime and crush the competition? They're not thinking, how can I make people's lives better? They're thinking, how can I make my life better and win? So I started out graduating at Boston University, doing some film work. Then I did some other projects at Harvard where I won a little film prize. I worked at WGBH in Boston for a while, and that was slightly uncomfortable for me. But anyway, while I was there, I happened to go over to MIT and visit their machine architecture group, and which was their forerunner of their media lab. Their architecture group at the time was the size of this room. Now it's a whole building over there in Cambridge. Anyway, they had something called the Aspen Movie Map, which was a still frame video disc project that allowed you to actually drive around Aspen. It was touchscreen, and this is 1978. This is the modern version of the same thing, Google Maps. Anyway, I gave up on that, the whole media thing, I thought, and I got into computers, and I went to a local tech school and got my little tech certificate, and nobody would hire me in any bank or insurance company to run their big iron in their little air-conditioned labs. So I did find a local video disc company, and we did a lot of projects, Each one was roughly about $500,000. So that was a lot of money. We did a project for Bell Atlantic that they were able to pay for this booth and the project, which was over $1 million, by tracing sales right to this. This is when they were a 6-month-old company. And then they asked me, because it was such a success, to do what they were called demo discs. Demo discs were floppy diskettes, if anybody remembers what they are. And we put together a 45-minute presentation on this floppy that they sent out to everybody. And we did several of them I brought enough money into my little group that we started our own company called VGraph for video graphics. And in the process of doing that, we discovered that people like to have interactive control, interactive graphic control, which is what those things were, but we were spending a lot of our time pushing pixels around using PC Paint, of all things. PC Paint and Turbo Pascal, our costs were basically $30, and we were making about $30,000 a month on it. So anyway, we were spending a lot of time pushing these pixels, so we decided we were going to do something about it. So we got a frame grabber board, which was just out. But then I said, frame grabber boards are fine, but what are people doing with them? They're making slideshows. They weren't even making slideshows. They were doing it for T-shirts and graphic arts. And I said, well, why don't we just add audio to this thing? And so we found a audio board that was used for phone answering, because there were no audio boards for anything else. And it was a voice storing system. So we created a little box that converted it to a line output on a video. So voila, we had multimedia in our computer. It was the first one. And this is the really hideous packaging for our first product, called virtual video. And we thought people were going to use it for desktop video because we figured they'd understand making linear videos out of their computers. Then we showed it off at this symposium. And one of the featured speakers was Timothy Leary, who managed to stand up long enough to give a talk. And he thought it was far out, which is what he said. That was high praise, so to speak. Anyway, also at that symposium was a representative from a small company in New York, or that he was from New York, a small company in California called Macromind. And what they were doing at Macromind at the time was selling object modules to gamers. They didn't even have an authoring system or anything like that. They were just trying to sell do their bundle deals. So anyway, they attended my lecture and they thought it was interesting and came back with something else later on. Well, we thought this was a pretty good deal. We would go ahead, try to sell this thing, and we were selling it. We tried to sell it to Microsoft, and Microsoft actually liked it. This was when there were 9 people in their multimedia group. They liked it so much they offered to publish it for us. We had a problem. We were 2 guys. We were self-funded. We had a DOS program. And they wanted a Windows version. And at this time, Windows was called basically, it was an add-on to DOS. It was like a shell. And it was very cryptic and difficult. And we were just 2 guys. We couldn't afford to do it ourselves. And so we said, would you help us? And they said, no. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. And so we went on to do other things. And we did a lot of work for DuPont, and that was great. We made some money with that. Enough money to publish our own software, which we called still virtual video. And we kept going along with it, trying to convince people that it was a good idea. And I would go out and show people this thing. And they would look at me like they just saw a fish pop out of a toaster. Because at this time, computers were doing text screens and spreadsheets. And they weren't doing full color images. So it was kind of tough sledding for a while. But we found these guys in Florida who had a paint program. And they were willing to put their paint program in with our authoring system. And they called the Tempera show. And then we had a good time and a great run. And it was all good fun. And everything was going fine. And we even got so many of these things out there that a distributor in New Zealand was complaining that every time you bought a hamburger, the thing came with it because they had it bundled in with all sorts of stuff. So anyway, we were in distribution. It was a lot of fun. We were making money. And then I went to have Chinese food with a friend of mine and discovered this book, which I thought, great, a multimedia book. And then I opened it up and I thought, oh, look, my publisher has put my software in this book. And I didn't know about that. So anyway, we fell to fighting over this. And it became a big mess. And he filed bankruptcy to avoid copyright violations. And it was a big problem because I had to fight through federal court in Florida and eventually won. But by the time I won, Windows 1.5 or something came out and nobody's using DOS. And everybody didn't even think DOS was possible to do multimedia. It was just funny the way the thing flipped. I'm not even getting into comparing what we were doing to Apple because at that time it was like church and state. I mean, you either were an Apple person or you were a PC person, and there was a war. Thank goodness that war's over, I think. Anyway, here I am giving the thing to the Smithsonian, and that's ENIAC in the background. That's just a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, here's the little thing about it, and it took them 6 years to write up the brochure, this entry in the Smithsonian, and they put it under the computer. I don't know. I said, why don't you put it under the software? And they didn't really have an answer for that, so they moved the software up to the title. Anyway, in the meantime, I learned that the guys who were publishing our software in Florida, while they were in bankruptcy, they made $4 million selling our software, and the judge said they didn't have to pay us any royalties because they needed the money. It's like giving bankrupt airlines free gasoline. But anyway, what we discovered was that they had been secretly in conversation with Macromedia. And they were trying to use the money they were making selling our stuff to do a merger with Macromedia, and that blew up. So we saved Macromedia the trouble of dealing with those guys, and they went off to do quite well for themselves. I think they sold out to Adobe for $4 billion or something like that. So anyway, we took the money we made with this debacle and we put it into a new product called Ozone for the object zone. The Ozone was a revolutionary system for building applications just using a mouse. And it had 4 views which are integrated. We have object-oriented programming using little components. And what we learned in our previous incarnation in the DOS world was that everybody wanted their own features. There's no way we could put everybody's features into one stupid program. So we said, add your own features. And there were catalogs and hundreds of these components. And you could add your own things. And you could either drop them into a little multimedia timeline or use a text interface. But each one of these interfaces was 100% competent in making a program. And they were all integrated. So when you ran it, you could see it running in every view. And we got a patent on this. Because unlike the multimedia thing, we didn't get a patent on that. Because they said in the 80s you couldn't patent software. And then we were in a trade show with Compton's showing our program, our virtual video program, about 6 months before they filed their patent on multimedia. That created a big war. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not. But that made patenting software nearly impossible. So we filed this in 1994, and we didn't get it until 1999. It took 3 years to get the first response from the patent office, where Microsoft was getting patents in 18 to 20 months. That's the life of an individual inventor and the government's version of a level playing field. So anyway, we thought, well, we'll sell this to Microsoft because it's pretty cool, and they're a big publisher, and we're still 2 guys. And that's my little note to them. But you'll see that this is back in 1995, and we were selling this with internet access. The application would run over the web. It would download scripts over the web. You could download objects over the web. And this was in HTML 1.0. So what we did is we made our own components. One of the components we made was a little web browser component that you could add your internet access to your application, because we thought this would allow people to download files from the internet to update their kiosks and things like that, but they could also see the web from their application. Well, basically, that's been flipped on its head now. People are using the web to view Flash applications. So it's kind of just a mirror image of the whole thing. We didn't get it quite right. But what we did do is we made these little web widgets, which were the browser, the HTML, and just a communication device. And so we thought, we'll make another. And we were selling this through catalogs. And we even tried to sell it to the Microsoft's catalog. But somehow this version of the catalog never got published, which is curious. You'll see why. We even got a little write-up in PC Magazine, which we thought was a big deal. And we made a little app, a little component that would run Java inside a Windows application. You know the way you have Java running inside a little window in your browser now? Well, we did this inside applications. And we thought, this is so great. And Microsoft was fighting, of course, with everybody, and they were fighting with Sun. And there was a big war there. And we said, we had a press release, why can't we all just get along? So we added this, and we said, why doesn't Microsoft buy this? And so we sent it over to them, and they looked at the application, and they wanted more material, and we sent our whole program to them, which included the web browser. And the guy who evaluated that was the guy who got Spyglass software into Microsoft. And we thought, this is great. We're getting a really high-end review. Boy, we're going to really be successful. And then they liked it so much, they got a patent on it. You'll notice that their patent was filed over a year after we were publishing our software, and they didn't mention us anywhere. This is kind of annoying to me, but anyway. We did save Microsoft because they were able to use our idea to get the AOL contract instead of Netscape. And we just plugged along, and they also used this web browser component in their fight with the Justice Department. They said it was part of the operating system. So it saved them twice. And they still didn't send me Christmas cards. Anyway, they didn't want our software because of something called total cost of ownership, which meant something to them. But basically, the problem was it was so radically different than what most people do, which is live in the world of code, that they didn't want to have to change the world. And so 40 years later, everybody's still typing in code instead of doing clever things like connecting objects on the screen and just making it happen in about 8% of the time. Anyway, here we are, and these are objects that you are probably familiar with. And what you'll see inside every one of these phones is a web browser control running through a library that operates it, coming up into your browser. Anyway, I said that's that, and I was talking to a guy. We thought we needed more marketing. So we hooked up with this guy who we thought was a super duper sales guy, and we were talking about making, how ridiculous it was that everybody does all this phone tag and sending emails around to set up appointments. So he decided to go off. We didn't hire him or even bring him in as a partner. And he went and hired another company to make an appointment product. And it was this Java thing that was running like mud, and it had 7 steps, and he spent $1 zillion doing it. And he said, well, what do you think? I implemented that idea we had talking over lunch without you. And I said, well, I don't really think much of it. And so I came back the next day and said, you should do it this way. With HTML, make a calendar application, send invitations out from here, and when people respond, they get their own personal calendar. And so we launched eCal with this. We've got a patent on that. It is now, most of the ideas are now incorporated into Google calendars. We had 7 million people back in 1990s using this thing, which roughly is 10% of the internet. But personalities being what they are, I left the company. They went off into a direction I never would have advised them to go into. Although they did incorporate the idea of software as a service. So they basically OEM'd this, and they had 25 or 30 different companies using this application inside their own websites. So AT&T was using it, and people like that. so I left that and I made this little company up with a friend of mine who was a banker from Credit Suisse, and his client was Walmart. And we created this three-way matching system to do international trade. So basically, three-way matching, automatic payments, reduces the cost of money. You can transfer your credit, blah, blah, blah. So we did this. And in the process, we discovered VerticalNet, who was a local company around here. It was a big deal, giant success, all this stuff. We discovered from talking to them that while everybody wanted the big iron solution, they had so few transactions on a daily basis, you could run it out of my laptop. But we still had to raise the money to do the big iron. So we went out to raise the money. We were 3 weeks away from closing a deal. And bam, the dot bomb really hit. I said, this is too much. This is just ridiculous. I'm going to my room, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a history book. And this history book was the basis for a memorial that they put up in Philadelphia recently, the President's House Memorial, which turned into something different than what I had originally intended. But it's there, and everybody can visit it, and at least the executive branch is now represented in Independence Mall. It had been missing, and it was, in fact, just a ladies' toilet before I got involved. So I think that's an improvement anyway. And that brings us up to this. And my new thing, which I'm going to disappoint everybody, and Ben is going to strangle me later, but I have to do this under non-disclosure, so I'm not going to talk much about my robot. But I will tell you, it's a useful, simple item, very much like the other stuff that I've created. It is not a creepy plastic or a little, like, squeezy cat or anything. It'll be able to do something useful, and we're going to make them, but I'm not ready yet to really talk about what it is or sell them. So I have to disappoint you, I'm sorry. If there's anybody who is interested in knowing more and signing a disclosure and becoming involved in it, there I am. They can contact me.
Would you be willing to come back when you feel like the IP is safe? Or...
Sure. I'll come back. I'll bring them along. I'll sell them to people. That's the point, isn't it?
Well, let's open it up for Q&A. Thanks for telling your story. It's really epic.
Thanks, Rob. So the house rules are please state your name, who you're with, and we can direct some questions to Robert. Questions?
Hello, Janelle Snyder from Snyder Law. I'm an IP attorney, not a patent attorney specifically, but trademarks and trade secrets and whatnot. And I am fascinated by how many times you lost your IP.
Yeah.
Did you have people you were working with, or what? Like, how did that happen?
People are thieves. They suffer from moral, problems. That's how it happened. I mean, Microsoft could have put our name down on their patent application.
Well, that's not even a valid patent if it was.
It's not a valid patent, but I don't have an extra $30,000 just to kick them in the shins when they're one of the largest companies in the world. If you would like to chip in, I'll be happy to work with you on that. I've got plenty of documentation. But we didn't think that you could patent a browser when it already existed. We thought what we were doing was adding two obvious things together. You will remember as an IP attorney that the guy who invented the pencil eraser did not get a patent because it was not novel. He didn't actually invent anything new, he just combined two existing things, a pencil and an eraser. So given that, they should never have gotten their patent anyway. They just took an existing thing, which is a component, and an existing thing that was a browser. And this is one of the problems with the patent business right now. People get patents that they probably shouldn't. And we had actual working product. It wasn't just something we made up and said, well, we'll get a patent on this and see if we can raise some money and then do it. So, and also with multimedia, if you have a good idea people see it, and they can't unsee it. And then they think it's their idea. And then they run with it. And what are you going to do? You know, we just thought it was a good idea, and we didn't think we could get a patent on it because everybody said, well, you know, computer programming is just algorithms, and you can't patent algorithms. And they didn't actually, you know, these guys in Florida, well, that's a whole different kettle of fish, but yeah.
You were in partnership with them, though. So.
They were our publishers, but they were not forthright in their dealings. Just put it that way. Yes?
Yeah, I've always been interested in the way patents have gone and kind of continuing the theme here. And it seems like you've gone through many years dealing with patent issues. I'm wondering what you've seen that's changed or what's been going on. And right now, I wouldn't even bother going into a couple of the ideas I have because I don't want to mess with patents that are out there that should never have been given, even by the definition of what patents should have been given. And so I'm just ignoring those things and not going into it. I mean, when did this change? Has it changed now versus back then?
Well, what happened was, because of the Compton patent, which was clearly ridiculous, because we predated them and so did other people, as a result of that, they became a very political thing, because companies like Apple and Microsoft have a lot of weight. And so the patent office became sensitized to this.
Well, they're still being stuck themselves by patents too. I mean, it kind of goes both ways, doesn't it?
It goes both ways, but basically, what can I say without... We used to have a first-to-invent system, which protected individual inventors. So if I invented something first, I could prove it. Then the big guy, you could go up to them, and if they did it with... And this is what Microsoft did. It was very clever with our thing, is they waited over a year before the first announcement to get their patent application in. That meant that we could not be listed as co-inventors. Because if they had not waited a year, we could have said, we're co-inventors, we want a revenue stream from this, and that would have made it worthwhile going after them.
Right, but it's already been disclosed for a year.
Right, so they
It's
could...
not patentable.
Right, but they got the patent anyway because they have good attorneys. I mean, we literally, the response we got from the patent office on our object-oriented programming, which took 3 years, was from a guy who said, oh, you can't get a patent on this because here's a patent on a computer system that takes pictures of objects. And to him, that was the same thing as object-oriented programming. This is the kind of slogging we had to do to go through to get this. So then they changed it to this first-to-file thing. And the first-to-file thing is why I can't talk about it, because that makes us like Europe. And if I announce this, then I will never be able to patent it. So getting patents, because you can raise money around them, enforcing them is a very difficult thing, which is why we sold our patent to Google, or through an intermediary, because it was going to cost us, we figured, at least $10 million to protect our patent rights, even though everybody was using them with the object wrapping, which is inside .NET and inside Android, and the other things that were in there. We were going to have to give away so much of the patent rights to raise the money. And we would have to pursue this thing through court and through the shifting sands of various decisions that we figured the risk and the cost, we'll just put it up for auction, and we sold it. Because the funny thing about patents is that you file your patent based on the laws that exist at the time. Then case law comes through, and then your patent is judged according to that case law, not according to the patent and the times that you made it. So it's a very weird system. So you just have to be careful of that. Yes, sir.
Hi, Ray Sarnacki, I'm an advisor here at the lab. So, given what you know now, based on the experience, what advice would you have, or what would you do differently, given the problems that you encountered?
Well, I'm still the same person, so I doubt if I'd do anything differently, really. But I'd probably try to raise some more money. I did go to the Ben Franklin Partnership to raise money, and they didn't believe what we were doing was going to succeed. So that didn't really work. And I'm not really a sales guy, I'm a fundraiser. I also went to a local VC firm around here, and the guy looked at it like, you must be crazy. And I said, you're going to have multimedia on every desktop in 5 years. And he said, get out of here. And this is the same guy that turned down Steve Jobs, so I didn't feel too bad about it. So I don't know what I would do differently, honestly. That's what I'm trying to figure out for my next thing. What will I do to make this actually work? That's tricky. Anybody in the back? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Nara. I'm one of the coworkers here at the lab. I was wondering if you ever considered maybe like just giving up and joining one of the big guys like Microsoft and just working for them.
They'd
or,
never hire me.
Or one of the.
I'm too weird for them. They would look at me and go, look what you've done. We can't hire you. You're too used to doing exactly what you want. And how are you going to work within our system? Because everybody who works here sticks to the rules. I'm a not only like out of the box guy, it's like the box isn't even square.
They seem to be looking more for out of the box people nowadays, though. I guess that changed.
I really don't know. I haven't thought about it for a long time.
So as a follow-up, what made you keep going and just starting new things after all these letdowns?
Because people don't want to hire me. I've got to make a living. I've got to go through, and I always have to make up my own life. I'm one of these people who just is in a mental spot where that's what I have to do. I don't know. I'm not really an employee. I have to put my heart and soul into things and follow along with what I believe actually works. And I see things in very simple terms. I don't know. Do you know many chefs, people who cook food for a living? They are very basic people. They take basic elements, they put them together in the most wonderful way, and people have original and non-synthetic experiences. That's what I do, kind of, except I do it with technology. I'm a basic guy. I just think this is a good idea, and I'm not into the rigmarole and the process of working within a system that isn't really for me. That's why, I guess. But if somebody wants to hire me as a consultant, I'll be happy to work for them. Hello, world. Yes, sir.
Well, if just on that same thought, you have Microsoft and you have Apple, because you have geniuses creating those businesses that wouldn't work for IBM.
Right.
So at the time in the 60s and 70s, we would have thought that IBM was the big giant, big blue.
Right.
And HAL and everything that IBM represented, and then all of a sudden you had Microsoft and Apple and Sun and the various companies. So are you suggesting now that in today's marketplace, Microsoft and Apple and all of the people that we're working with are so large that nobody new can enter markets and challenge them?
No, I'm not saying that at all. Back to your historical perspective, Jobs and Gates took other people's ideas and made companies around them and crushed their competition. So they were the aggressive financial billionaire in the making. They aren't inventive people, but they recognize and they have an eye for talent. It's like a guy who has a record company, like Sony. They don't make the music, but they package it and they sell it. And so these guys would do the same thing. They take technology, they pick up little things like a web browser, package it inside their systems, and sell it to people. And one of the things I learned as an early creator, if you will, is that, and this is something I don't really know about in my own personal life, but there's a lot of fear out there. And so people react to new technology with uncertainty and fear. And they think, here's this little guy with this interesting thing I don't really understand, so I feel threatened. And I don't want to adopt it from a little company that's going to fail because then I'll look bad at work. And that's why big companies provide this sort of aura of safety and security that if you buy IBM, at this point in the 70s, if you bought an IBM product, you weren't going to get fired. If you buy a VGraph product, people will go, who the hell is that? So the fear element is really important. And then people like to be told about new ideas from authorities that they trust. So they know they're not being fooled and scammed. And so there's that too. So there's, fear, uncertainty. But there are people who are willing to adopt new ideas. For example, I showed this to the virtual video thing to a guy, and he loved it. He just didn't understand it. And so he said, well, this is great. Will it do pictures of banking? Of course, it'll do pictures of anything. But he wanted to know if he could get it to work for him. And that's the way he formulated the question. Yes, there are ways of getting through and building things, but companies like Google are vacuum cleaners. They just go around and buy up little things and sit on them, or make and put them in their labs and go ahead with it. They're not really, that's what's happening in the market right now.
So are you suggesting Google is stifling innovation in our country?
No, I don't think they're stifling it. I think what they do is, if you have a good product, people will buy it. If you get enough of a market, you'll get somebody's attention, and they'll come and they'll see if they want to buy it from you. And if you don't sell it to them, look at companies like, I won't list them, but there are companies that have turned Google down and then Google crushes them. So that's the big bad world out there. And it is possible to succeed. But I'm just saying that it's difficult to, continually get to the next level without changing yourself into somebody who is not an inventor, not a creative person. You have to change your personality into being like one of these billionaire types, which isn't me. That's not what I am.
We have another question in the front.
Hi, I'm Paul Prost, a retired patent attorney. Two questions. First of all, there's merit. I agree there's merit in what you say about the patent system, but it exists and I think you have to deal with it. So I have two questions. First of all, do you feel you had competent patent counsel?
Yes.
And secondly, how and when would you advise a new entrepreneur to start dealing with patent counsel in view of the problems that you could encounter?
I think as soon as you think you have a good idea and it's worthy of a patent, and you do a little research and you figure out how you're going to slice and dice the invention, I think you should contact a patent attorney and see if you
So
can
even
get.
with all the problems in the system, you have to deal with it.
Oh yeah, it's like you still have to pay your electric bill even if you don't like nuclear power.
How about we do one more question or one or two, and then we'll break so people can talk to Rob directly, and we'll do an interview for a wrap-up. Jesse?
Good. I'm Jessie Pearsall. I'm Special Events Coordinator here at the lab. So hypothetical situation, 20-year-old you walks in.
Right.
What advice would you have for him or her?
Raise more money.
That's it?
Yeah. That's it, because if we had the ability to create a Windows version of our multimedia system, my world would be different, and I may not be here talking to you without armed guards.
What about like choosing your allies and things that relate to your relationships? Certainly, you may not think that the experiences that you have like altered your experience of life. As you, I think, mentioned earlier, that you're the same guy. But do you feel like those experiences that you had, because there were a variety of times where maybe you felt like let down by your partnerships or your relationships, how did that set the precedent for your future relationships or collaborative endeavors?
Well, I don't know. I tend to think the best of people. I'm not as suspicious, perhaps, as I ought to be. So I get myself into these situations where I'm sharing ideas and I'm talking about things, I'm trying to move things forward. And the people I'm talking to are morally compromised. So you either don't talk about things, or you make the slot so small, who's going to get through it? I really don't know the answer. I mean, anybody can be fooled, I suppose. I mean, these guys at Macromedia were about to be fooled.
I have like one or two more questions. if it's
Sure.
Okay. So you said that you couldn't share direct IP from the robots. Can you share something about like maybe your vision for robots, maybe at large, not necessarily your specific robots, just how you feel robots will serve human beings and kind of society going forward into the future?
I would prefer it if robots stayed stupid
Okay.
and that they were not armed.
Okay. Me too. Me too.
I'll just leave, and that they don't get, bigger than me. So, and I kind of just, I'll leave it at that. I mean, I think that there's a huge potential for great harm in robots. And I think, for example, self-driving cars is a very interesting kind of robotic question. Do you want to trust your life to a car that could take you to prison? You get in your little self-driving car and you think you're going to go to the supermarket. And the car gets a warrant for your arrest because you look like somebody else. And you're in prison. Having a good day now?
I might have a question.
Yeah, I did actually. I just wanted to. So you were talking earlier about money raising and so forth and so on. What do you think of the crowdfunding model that internet multimedia has kind of enabled people to just put their ideas on the internet and say, "Send me money"? Have you checked that out? What do you think of that?
I think that's a great idea. But my observation with the crowdfunding thing is that if you come up with a little squeaky prototype and you're sitting in your basement trying to talk to the internet about your great idea, you're going to get nowhere. But if you've got, what's this guy's name at Steam? Gabe Newland? Is that who he is?
Gabe Newell?
Yeah. And he's wearing your Oculus Rift, and he says this is the greatest thing on earth, you're going to raise a lot of money. So it's kind of like outsourcing a mezzanine round in venture capital. You have to have some product that you can basically deliver for a cheap price that's sexy and safe and fun. But if you're a guy sitting in his garage with some little gizmo that's tied together with binder twine, I don't
You
think.
have to have a slick video and you have to have a celebrity spokesperson.
Anybody here know what binder twine is? Anyway, it's something that holds together bales of hay. Okay. Yes. You do know what it is. Excellent. Excellent. We're still in Chester County. That's great.
We'll do one more question, then we'll wrap up, and then we can
Yes, sir.
talk to Rob.
I have a question about branding. The names behind all the products you have changed year to year, it looks like. How did you keep consistent? Name out there? How did people know to come to you to give you money or to support you in some way?
I'll tell you an interesting story about the press. It's not really an answer to this because I just make up the names. I don't have any naming company or algorithm or anything. I just make them up. It's a real struggle to keep yourself above the noise or to even get on the radar screen. And I had a conversation with a leading press person, and he loved the story, he loved the technology, he was ready to go, and then he said, "Who's your venture company?" And I said, "I don't have a venture company, we're self-funded." He said, "This conversation's over." You draw your own conclusions about that.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up.